To make a mattress, we've come to a mattress factory. It's absolutely huge. They can make 1,000 mattresses here every single day. Making a mattress is a bit like making a big sandwich. Now, the outside of the mattress is called the outer casing, and it's made of thin layers of fabric and a material called wadding. And it's the outside that holds everything together. And inside, you have the filling. Here we have a layer of something called foam, and foam is soft and spongy. It makes the mattress really comfortable to sleep on. And then we have a layer of a material called polyester, and that protects these bits, the soft, springy parts. What do you think's inside here? That's right, it's a spring. A spring is a piece of metal that's been coiled around and fixed into this shape. And it's really strong, so that when you push down on it, it will always spring back to the same shape. And it's what makes a mattress so springy to lie on. But how do you think all of these parts come together? The springs arrive at the factory in big rolls like this. But to use them in mattresses, we need to make them flat. So the rolls are put into this machine, which unravels them into flat beds of springs. Oh, here comes the first one now.
It looks a bit like a giant honeycomb.
Next, it's the foam layer. This is where the factory keeps all of the foam. But these blocks of foam are far too big for our mattress.
So the big blocks of foam get chopped into slices by this foam cutting machine. It's a bit like slicing through a big cake.
But what makes foam so squashy? I'm going to use my special camera so we can see the foam in more detail. This is a microscopic camera, which means we can see really small things much bigger. Take a look at this. Whoa, look at that. Can you see? There are hundreds and hundreds of tiny pockets of air inside the foam. It's a little bit like a sponge you might use in the bath. But watch this, when I squash the foam, the air is pushed out of those pockets. And when I let go, the air rushes back in. And it's the air that makes the foam squashy. It's brilliant, isn't it?
Next, the mattress's outer casing is made in a machine which puts thin fabric together with squishy wadding.
Wow, this enormous machine is a quilting machine. And its job is to roll and stitch the different layers of material together to make one soft, fatter layer. Can you see all of the thread going over the top of my head? It's like being under a giant spider's web. Can you see the pattern it's making to stitch the layers together? They look like diamonds, don't they?
Now it's time to make the sides of the outer casing, called the border.
Look how these two robot sewing machines are working together to stitch a circle pattern. This one does the first half, and this one does the other. Clever, isn't it?
And soon there's a finished roll of border.
So we have the top layer and the borders of the outer casing. Now we just need the bottom, and that's cut here. The guys, they cut 10 at a time.
Look how fast that fabric cutter moves.
It's like a little remote control car.
But it can only move in straight lines, so the round corners are trimmed with a hand cutter.
And here we have all of the parts we need to make a mattress. Now it's just time to put it together, like a sandwich.
The different layers are fixed together with tiny silver rings. The bottom layer first, then the polyester, the foam filling, and that quilted outer casing. Finally, the border is fixed around the edges. But it's not quite finished yet.
This This is a tape edging machine, and it's Mark's job to move it all the way around the edges. It's like it's chomping around the edges. Can you hear it? And here we have a finished mattress.
All it needs is a plastic coat to keep it clean while it's transported. Then it's popped onto this moving track called a conveyor belt.
But where do you think they go? Let's use my special camera to find out.
Here we go. They're going on quite a journey, aren't they?
They come here to the warehouse where they're stored, ready to be sent out across the country. This is a workshop where they make cutlery. And there are lots of big machines here that are used to make knives, forks and spoons. Cutlery can be made out of different types of metal, such as steel or silver. But in this workshop, all cutlery starts out like this, as a huge sheet of metal called nickel silver. The sheets of metal are pushed through this machine. It's called a press, but it's quite noisy, so I'm going to pop on my ear defenders. The press cuts out shapes in the metal really, really quickly. It works a bit like a cookie cutter. The shapes that have been cut out are called blanks. But what do you think this is going to be? This is going to be a fork, but you couldn't eat with that, could you? Forks have prongs. Those are the spiky bits that you need to poke into food, so it's easy to pick up. So this blank needs some prongs. The blanks are put inside this machine here, one at a time. It's called a piercing tool, and it cuts 3 slits into the fork. Can you see the 3 slits? 1, 2, 3. But what's at this bit at the top? Well, it's called the gate, and it keeps the prongs nice and straight until the fork is finished.
Next, the handle goes into a really powerful machine called a drop press.
Inside the press is one of these. It's called a die, and it presses a pattern onto our fork handle. And if you look closely here, you can see the pattern, but it's really small, isn't it? So let's take a closer look with my special camera. This is a microscope, and it lets me see really small things in lots of detail. Wow! Look at that!
In close-up, you can see lots of little circles, and that's the pattern that will be pressed onto the fork.
The heavy press drops down onto the fork with 360 tons of force. That's the same as 120 elephants stamping down on top of the cutlery. And look, here's the pattern. It looks good, doesn't it? And this machine takes off the gate at the top of the prongs. It's sort of like a set of big green chomping teeth. Oh, can you hear that noise? It's really screechy, isn't it?
This is a filing machine. It cuts off tiny bits of metal to make the fork pointy.
Now, it really looks like a fork, doesn't it? But it's not quite finished. It's quite dull, not as shiny as the ones we have at home.
The forks are given a dip in this container full of special chemicals.
Inside these pouches, there are blocks of silver. And when the machine is turned on, electricity runs through, which makes the silver stick to the cutlery. And this is called electrolysis. Can you see the forks swaying back and forward? It's a bit like they're dancing, isn't it? This is to make sure that every bit of the fork gets covered in silver. Wow! And there you are, a set of shiny new forks. All finished, ready to eat your dinner with. This is where frames are made, in a glasses frame factory.
There are hundreds of glasses frames being made here. Some are made by hand and some are made by machines.
The frames start out as a wire called coil, and in this factory they use a type of metal called gold. But how does this turn into these? There are three main parts needed to make the frames. These round parts here are called the rim, and they hold the glass lens in place. And then these long sticks are called the temple, because they run along the temple on your head. And then this middle bit is called the bridge, because it sits a little bit like a bridge on your nose, and that holds the two rims together.
It's Chandrika's job to put the temples together.
First, the gold coil is cut to the right lengths to make all of our pieces, and she does that using a cutting machine.
The pieces are then put into a machine called a knuckle stamper.
It pushes down and to the side at the end of that piece of metal at the same time to create a little bump like this. Next, it's put inside this machine called a shin press, which squashes that knuckle so that it's smooth and flat. What do you think it sounds like? I think it sounds a bit like a train. Now it's time to make the part that goes over your nose, the bridge. They start out like this, as a straight piece of wire, and goes into this machine for the first bending. Here you go.
In all, it takes 14 machines to bend the coil into exactly the right bridge shape. That's a lot of bending.
And there you have it, a finished bridge. To make the rims, Ray feeds some more gold coil into this machine. It's called a rim winder.
The gold coil is held in place in the machine, ready to be shaped.
What shape do you think the rims are going to be? That's right, it's a circle.
Now we've got all the parts we need to make our frames, but we need to put them all together.
And for that we need something called a hinge.
A hinge is a small joining part, and it's made by cutting the gold coil and putting tiny holes in it. The hinges are attached to the rims using something called soldering. This is where two pieces of metal are stuck together by melting another tiny piece of metal in between, just like glue. The hinged rims are then attached to the bridge, this time by making both pieces of metal really hot, so they melt and join together. This is called welding.
For the first time, they're starting to look like frames, aren't they? But these aren't going to stay on very well. That's because they need the temples.
The temples will be attached with screws, very tiny ones.
These ones are smaller than an ant. So I've got my special camera with me. This is a microscope, and it helps us to see very small things much bigger. Let's take a look. Wow, look at that. It is absolutely tiny. But now we can see all of the little grooves, and those are the bits that will screw into the parts so they stay together.
After they've been screwed into place, look on my special camera. can you see the screw on the frame?
And look, that's the screw that's holding all the parts together. Oh, these look bright and shiny, don't they? But they do need some finishing touches.
For the last stage, Chandrika puts on some plastic tips which are bent so they can hook around your ears, and some plastic pads for your nose.
And ta-da! The frames are ready. But these ones are empty. That's because they need to get sent to the opticians who will fit the special lenses that will help your eyes so you can see things more clearly. These are really comfortable and I think they look pretty good too. Hand wash is made in a big factory like this. Here, they can make 10,000 bottles of hand wash every single day. That's going to keep a lot of hands clean. All of the ingredients are kept in different size containers, and the first thing to do is mix them all together. These two huge machines are the hand wash mixers, and this is where all of the ingredients go. Wow! Can you see those curved metal blades? Well, those are going to spin round and round to mix all of the ingredients together. There's already some water inside, and the first thing we're going to add is some salt.
Whoosh! Can you see the blades mixing the salt with the water?
The next ingredient to get added to the mixer is a chemical with a really long name, sodium lauryl sulfate, and it's what makes the soap bubbles when we use it. But there's so much of it, it has to get pumped into the mixer through a big tube.
Now Ian is measuring out the next ingredient, called glycerin.
Can you see how shiny and gloopy it is? This is what makes the hand wash slippery.
The glycerin is poured into the mixture too.
Now, most hand washes have a nice smell, so that when we use them, our hands smell nice. And this smell comes from this ingredient. It's a type of perfume, just like the perfume you might have smelt someone wearing. But shall we see what this one smells like? Okay. Wow. Oh, it smells like flowers, it's sweet and very, very strong.
So, in goes the perfume. The mix is nearly ready. There's just one more extra special ingredient to add, and it comes from a plant.
It's called an aloe plant. Now, you mustn't do this at home, but would you like to see inside the leaf? Here we go. Can you see that sticky material? It's called aloe vera, and that's what helps to soothe our skin.
The aloe vera is measured and poured into the mixture.
Hand wash comes in lots of different colours, and to do this, a colouring is added. It's a bit like adding colour to icing on a cake.
At the moment, it looks really dark, so it's hard to see what colour it is.
But what colour do you think it's going to be? Let's find out. I've got my special camera with me so we can see what's happening inside the mixer. First, Stephen's going to turn it on. We're ready. Here it goes. Can you see what colour it is? That's right, it's blue. Whoa, look at that. Some of the mixture is sucked out of the bottom and pumped back in the top through this tube, and that helps to give it an extra good mix. Can you see all of the bubbles? That's the sodium lauryl sulfate working. Now we have to leave it for 5 minutes. It's a bit like cooking porridge in a big pot.
The hand wash is mixed until all the ingredients are blended together.
Now the hand wash is being tested, shall we see what it feels like? It wobbles like jelly, and the glycerin and the sodium lauryl sulfate make it all slippy. And it smells lovely and fresh too, and that's because of the perfume that was added. Oh.
But how does all the hand wash end up in these tiny bottles? Well, First, the mixture is pumped from this blue drum into this little tank called a header tank.
The header tank feeds the machine that fills the empty bottles with hand wash. It's really big and it can fill up to 8 bottles at a time. And those empty bottles get lined up and go into the machine just here. It's about to start.
The machine knows just the right amount of hand wash to squirt into each bottle.
Did you hear that sound? And then the bottle started to fill with hand wash. That was so quick, I nearly missed it. Let's count to see how long it takes. Ready? 1, 2, 3. 3 seconds and the bottles are full. The filled bottles are almost ready to be sent to the shop, but there is something missing. Can you guess what it is? That's right, there's no bottle top yet.
The full bottles travel down the conveyor belt to the topping station, where the technicians put the bottle tops on by hand.
Last thing to do is run the bottles through the labelling machine to stick a label on them so we know what's inside. And here we have a bottle of hand wash ready to use.